First of all, let me thank Rights Now for inviting me to speak to you today. I think it's especially important to commemorate human rights in the year 2008 because it is also the year of two major anniversaries. The first one is that it is the 60th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The second important anniversary is that it is the 10th anniversary of the guiding principles with regard to the rights of internally displaced persons that was put out by Francis Deng, who was the UN Special Rapporteur on the rights of internally displaced persons. It is especially relevant and sad, and I want to underline that we should have to mark this event in Sri Lanka by underlining the reasons why we need to have guiding principles for the rights of IDPs and why we should have a universal declaration of human rights. I don't think I have to give you the full Dobie list of violations of human rights in our country. But is it not tragic that when we talk about 10 years of the guiding principles, that in the last 3 years, every year, we have registered in Sri Lanka anything between 200 to 300 internally displaced persons over the last 3 years, and the last two in particular. And it gets worse because the numbers increase and the conditions in which these internally displaced persons have to live also gets worse. Secondly, in terms of the basic statistics that we have over the last 3 years and why we need to underscore the importance of a universal declaration of human rights is that we are probably the only country that calls ourselves a democracy in which we kill over 50 humanitarian workers, over 12 journalists, have the highest number of involuntary and enforced disappearances on record. This is a disgrace. It's worse than a disgrace. To me, it is a national tragedy. And I think as we approach the 10th of December, we need to remind ourselves and recommit ourselves to objectives and goals which say that never again will we have such disgraceful statistics associated with our country and all the people who inhabit it. Now, the subject that I have been given to talk about is about majoritarianism and democracy and about human rights. Quite often, I think when people think about democracy, they think about it in fairly simple and straightforward terms and assume that democracy must be government by the majority. That in any society, in order for there to be justice and fair play, that the largest number of people should have their rights upheld and their grievances addressed. However, what I want to suggest to you today is that that is not what democracy means if democracy is to be understood as being an idea which can be realized along with freedom and liberty. There are others who would argue, and I must say that I agree with them wholeheartedly, that the real test of a functioning democracy is not how it treats its majority, but rather, and very crucially, how it treats its minorities, how it treats the people in society who have less power and influence than most, how it treats those who are marginalized and isolated and alienated from that society. This notion that democracy must be founded upon the wishes of the majority alone is a recipe for disaster, because implicit in it is the notion that some people in the society or in the country are more privileged than others. And indeed, 60 years after our own independence, we still have public figures who will get up and make statements like what we had with the army commander a couple of months ago, and followed soon thereafter by the Minister for Environment, Mr. Ranawaka, where they both made the point that this country belongs to Sinhala Buddhists. All other communities live in this country on the compassion and tolerance of the majority Sinhala Buddhist community. Mr. Ranawaka also proceeded to give all of us a cockeyed history lesson. The Tamils in this country, he said, and indeed the Muslims too, are the descendants of visitors to this country. And why I say it is a cockeyed history lesson is because he said the Tamils in this country came here when the Mughals invaded India. As far as I know, the Mughals invaded India in the 15th and 16th centuries. There were Tamil kingdoms in this country in the 10th and 11th centuries. Now, it's that kind of attitude which they go on to say that minorities or other communities should not make unjust demands of the majority community because the country really belongs to them. It is that kind of attitude which is insulting, which is offensive, and let me say this quite clearly, it is the most fundamental and dangerous threat to national security and unity, because it is a poison. It will destroy this country as a home for people of different ethnicities, different religions, different opinions. If there is to be national unity, we all have to come together to understand that we do have differences, but we nevertheless can live together and celebrate those differences, because we also have something which is much more valuable and important in common.